to being directly present to experience that. And this all kind of connects to this idea of Stimmung, which means mood. And this is from Hans Gumbrecht, I think, who's a really great philosopher at Stanford. But Stimmung and mood is what is being lost in the digital age, because we don't have these moods that come from presence, from people being together, right? So when you're just online, there's no mood. You're just in this, looking at this flat screen, and it's blasting in your eyes. And so people will type things, will say isn't the right word, but will write things that they would never say, because there's no context, because there's no mood, there's no person on the other side of that screen. So in that way, it almost turns people, and sorry, I'm getting way off here, turns people into objects and flattens them. We can talk about that more. And this always happens when we talk. There's like 8 different ways we could go with this. I'm always writing so many notes whenever Robert and I have conversations, and then I'll look and it's this crazy chicken scratch, but
that's why we had to have you on the podcast. That's why we had to. No, but there's, I mean, it's incredible because, once upon a time, and I think we've talked about this, I said that I think the person who invented emoticons should win a Nobel Peace Prize, because emoticons, and this came from like a prior argument I had with a computer science professor. And I said, I'm really frustrated by textual communication because I feel like there's a loss of information. I think the statistic I read is 80% of our communication is body language, right?
Yeah.
So even by removing yourself from a physical location, you've already lost, let's say the data transmission is 100 megabytes, right? You have to transmit 100 megabytes from your brain to somebody else's brain, and you remove them from the room, you've already lost 80%, 80 megabytes from that message. You then take that, and then you have to write it out into a letter. And the sort of thing I say, well, all of us are not necessarily equipped to articulate our thoughts, so maybe it's sort of a really bad compression, right? And then we lose more information. So then we end up with this like very, very kind of lossy format of data transmission that then the other person has to pick up, unbundle, and then interpret. And so then there's a cause for a lot of misinterpretation. And so the point that the professor I was speaking to said is like, there's a loss of information, like from an information theory perspective. And so I said, well, I think the person who did the emoticons, because what they did is they tried to add information density to the message, right? And I had this whole thing, I was like trying to invent a language, and I was like trying to figure out how to add. It made no sense. And I was like, machine learning AI will do it. And it's like, you have no idea what you're talking about, dude. Like, you really don't. But what you said is right. I can't pronounce that word. You said schmood?
Stimmung.
No chance.
Mood.
The word that you mentioned for mood, like that is lost. And so even that idea that people become flat, and even within that adjective, right, the flattening of people, it very much mirrors the same like substrate that you're experiencing through, right? It's a flat screen. There's no 3 dimensions.